Hello and welcome. In this video, we are discussing functionalism and structuralism. We are doing chapter 6, which is anthropological studies, theories. We have done with classical evolution, diffusion, historical particularism. Now we will complete the next topic, which comes as functionalism and structural functionalism, as well as structuralism. As far as the structuralism was concerned, we associate two scholars with this school of functionalism. One is Malinowski, and second, who is structural functionalist, we call him as A.R.R. Brown. A.R.R. Brown. As far as the pure structuralism is concerned, it is C.L. Strauss, that is Claude Lévi-Strauss. Okay. So we'll start with the basic premise of functionalism. Then we will move particularly to Brown and Malinowski. So first is about functionalism. Under functionalism, we have to understand that it was a strong reaction towards classical evolutionism. It was a strong reaction towards classical evolution. But if we consider structuralism, this was not basically a kind of reaction towards structuralism, functionalism, classical evolutionism, or diffusion. This was a kind of complementary in nature for various methodologies or approaches. But as far as functionalism was concerned, it was a strong reaction towards classical evolution, and it basically implies the study of culture. We call it as here and now. That we have to study the culture at this particular place and right now. See, as far as functionalism is concerned, the very important thing which is associated with functionalisms or functionalists is this, that they used to focus on the functional aspect of culture. So we will write down the area of study or basic premise of this of functionalism. But before that, we will have a little introduction towards this discipline. So functionalism has its origin in sociology. To the work of Auguste Comte. I may have pronounced his name wrong, but that is how it is spelled, like Auguste Comte. It came in anthropology because of this particular two people, that is Auguste Comte and Henri de Saint-Simon or Simon. So these were the two people who brought functionalism in anthropology. Later this was adopted by A.R.R. Brown. A.R.R. Brown was first a classical evolutionist, then he became diffusionist, and then he became structural functionalist. So basically he is someone who have sold all the three boots right now. He was influenced basically by this functionalism, and he came in the discipline. And functionalism as a discipline, it enters into anthropology. So At this time of studying, the emphasis was shifted from past to present. That is what we have written here, that here and now. That was the it's basically, we call it as the area of study, or it become a shift. The shift have turned from past to present. Now we'll talk about the basic premise or basic feature, or the rudimentary parts of functionalism. But before that, we also have to understand that the functionalism also brought the study from diachronic to synchronic. See, these are the pointers, but at the same time these are also important for understanding. So what this diachronic or synchronic means, just tell me in the comment box that what does this particular two words mean. So the basic premise or the basic feature of this was study of how human society functions. Study of how human society functions. Okay, the next was that societal culture is a system consisting of parts. See, society is something which is made up of various parts. These individual parts may not have anything that we say is anything significant as an individual, but when we combine them together, we find them that they makes a complete body part. For example, a simple body part may not have a significance important, but when it comes to a body, that part will become very important. Third was parts are this, that the parts of societies, these parts are interconnected as well as interdependent on each other. At the same time, we see that they are integrated with each other. Now each part or fractions in it itself as well as in relation with other part. Now this each part 1, it is in relation with part 2, is also in relation with part n, which is also in relation with part 2. So basically this is nothing but a simple say, which means that each part, it functions in itself. So part 1 has its own function, that is f1. Part 2 has its own function, that is f2. Part pn has function called as fn. But at the same time, we see that they are independent but still interconnected, interdependent as well as interconnected as a form in society. So this is very important. The next point here is that the change in one part, change in one part will lead to change in other part. So change in one part will definitely lead to change in other part. And society and culture cannot be reduced to any part. See, society as well as culture, this is not something that we say that some parts of societies are more important than others, but society and culture cannot be reduced to part. For example, if we take a concept of village, which we will study in paper 2. So village has certain characteristics. For example, joint family, caste system, various social institutions like Jajmani system, caste panchayat, etc., or agricultural society. So these are some of the parts of village, but you cannot say that agriculture in itself it means that it is village, or joint family is something which means village. No, this is not like that. Similarly, society and culture, they are complete, they are organic, right? Any individual part, you cannot be reducing this society or culture to merely a part. The next part here is that they have greater importance to all part. See, there are basically more importance to significant part, but there are some parts within the parts which are even more important. So that is how this is basically the functionalism is. This functionalism, it gave a new kind of significance. It gives prime significance to field work, which was basically started by historical particularism by Franz Boas, right? By Franz Boas under historical particularism. But this came in significant, this work, field work, it obtained a prime significant in this particular school, which is functionalism. Now we'll talk about the very important A.R.R. Brown and his structural functionalism. A.R.R. Brown, basically, he was a classical evolutionist turned to diffusionist, who turned into structural functionalist. So basically he was someone who was moving with the time. He was a student of Rivers. He was a student of Rivers. Rivers was basically a diffusionist. Under which school? British, German or American? Tell me. Was it British? Was it German or American? Fine, I hope you have thought about it. It's British school. It's nothing different in that. A.R.R. Brown was influenced by sociologist Emile Durkheim. Okay, and he was fed up by this conjecturalism which had clouded diffusionist, which had basically clouded this diffusionism, and hence he left the diffusionism and became structural functionalist. He was trained at Cambridge and one of the founding member of structural functionalist. He criticized classical evolutionism and evolutionist when he saw monotheism in savagery. For example, in India, Malay tribe, they have this nuclear families. So these nuclear families are basically the part of civilization or modern society according to classical evolutionist. But now this feature of civilization have been found in simple society, that is tribal society, and hence similar happened to A.R.R. Brown when he found monotheism in savagery. Okay, next thing which is important here is he studied the Andamani Islanders in the year 1922, and he began the functionalism in Britain. So he was basically a pioneer in this British for the structural functionalism. He said that necessary conditions for survival forces society to move forward. He says that necessary conditions for survival, it forces society to move forward. And function of such forms of society is to fulfill the necessary condition. And the function of all forms of society, functions of all forms of society, is to fulfill necessary condition. Necessary condition. That is the function of all the society. So he says that there is social structuralism and social functionalism. Social structuralism is basically the institutions. Institutions will come under social structuralism, and activities which are carried out by individual as a part of society, which are interrelated, interdependent and integrated, are basically these three, that is interrelated, interdependent and integrated. These are the various activities of society which are carried out by individual. So this will come under the structural functionalism. See, this is the most simple way that I can explain this stuff, or anyone would have. Next is Malinowski. Okay, so next is Malinowski. Malinowski with its functionalism. So according to functionalists, the very basic premise here is that nothing in the society is there without its any purpose. Everything in society is there with a significant purpose. We say that our life or life of person is West, but at the same time we see there are people who said that every life has its meaning and a significance and a purpose in this world to serve. So basically Malinowski believed in functionalism, which believe in the function of or purpose of everything. Malinowski he gave the approach functionalism. It is also called it as psychological functionalism, or you can call it as need theory. Need theory is basically Malinowski's functionalism. So if a question comes on need theory, the expected answer should be on Malinowski's functionalism. Third is biocultural functionalism. Biocultural functionalism. According to Malinowski, there are 7 types of basic biological needs. There are 4 types of instrumental needs, and there are some of the integrative needs, and hence the name is given, which is need theory. Now Malinowski was basically a psychologist. He was a psychologist who got TB and went to Australia. He read a book which was written by James Fraser. See, after reading this book, I don't know what is there, but people, they try to, their views regarding society or things changes. Golden Bough. And after this, reading this book, he turned anthropologist. He studied Trobrianders. He studied Trobriand Islanders of the Papua New Guinea, and he gave this theory of biocultural functionalism. He says that all individuals have need. all individuals have need. Second, he says that primarily they are biological. Primarily they are biological needs. Third, he says that the work of culture is to satisfy need. Satisfying need is the job or work of culture. Fourth is, when primary needs are satisfied, secondary emerges. So when the primary needs are satisfied, the secondary needs comes. Culture, and according to him, culture is basically a need satisfying, need fulfilling mechanism which results in continuation of society. So culture is basically a need satisfying mechanism by which society continues. Society continues. So now we'll talk about the 7 basic needs, 4 instrumental needs, and the integrative needs. So the 7 basic needs. So according to Malinowski, there are 7 basic needs: food, reproduction, bodily comfort, movement, growth, health, and safety. Food is gathered by hunting and gathering. Reproduction, marriage and kinship. Bodily comfort by shelter. Movement by various activities. Growth by training. Health by hygiene. And safety by culture. Culture works as a protecting mechanism. There are 4 instrumental needs, which are economic, political, social, education. These are the 4 instrumental needs. Next is integrative. Integrative needs. First is religion. Second is norms. Third is value system. And fourth is standards. So these are the 4 various needs under integrative need mechanism. Next is that he was first, that is Malinowski was first to use systematic approach. Second, functionalist did not talk about change. This is basically the criticism that we are writing now. Functionalist did not talk about change. Third, they ignored the role of conflict. Fourth, they considered whatever existed in society has a role, and this led to conservatism. Fifth, they regarded the change to be purely adaptive in nature. That they say if there is any type of change, this is basically nothing but an adaptive nature. It is of adaptive nature. And sixth, that revolutionary questions were not considered by functionalist. Revolutionist questions were not considered by functionalist. So this is basically something that we discussed about Malinowski and Brown, but this debate of them do not end here. There are certain differences. A question directly can come as the regarding, just a minute, okay, the question may directly come that compare and contrast Malinowski and Brown. So now we'll write down Brown versus Malinowski, or just write down it as Brown versus Malinowski. Okay, so Brown versus Malinowski. Brown and Malinowski both belong to a school of functionalism, and they still, you see, you'll find that they still differ in approach, premise, methodology, as well as little theory, but that we'll discuss and write down here only. The common premise include the historical. This is something where they differ. Now we'll write down something where the common things are still present. Okay, so first is that the common historical background to functionalism. Both belong to the school of functionalism, and they both are reaction towards classical evolutionism and diffusionism. Third, they were both influenced by functionalists of sociology. Okay, and this society as a system and various parts which are interrelated and integrated, that is the common premises. That is, society and parts are basically integrated and interrelated are the common premises, and the very fact that change in one led to change in other, that is also comes under their common between them. But now we'll talk about the Malinowski and Brown. So Brown was basically keeping society at the center, where Malinowski kept individual and individual need at center. Malinowski says that the role of culture is to make sure that society continues and it fulfills the demand of society, but here it is the individual needs which are focused for Malinowski. The Radcliffe R.C. Brown or A.R.R. Brown, he says that this functionalism which Brown functions is structural functionalism, whereas the functionalism which Malinowski is doing is biological cultural functionalism, or psychological functionalism, or need theory, as we have discussed above. Brown have studied Andamani, as discussed about above, and Malinowski have studied the Australian Aborigine. As we have talked about, Brown have focused on societal need and Malinowski is on individual's need. Brown performs social structure and function. Method is basically through the social, structural and function, and the Malinowski, his methodology include biological and integrative needs. And for here it is social structure and function and the functions. See, for Brown we have talked that he was classical evolutionist turned diffusionist turned structural functionalist, right? He was a psychologist who turned anthropologist after reading Golden Bough. So this is all for their classification, that is their similarities and their differences. Now there is a little topic called as structuralism that we can talk right now. The scholar that we associate with structuralism is Claude Lévi-Strauss. According to C.L. Strauss, structuralism is a method for study of human society. Structuralism is a method of studying human society, and this was founded by C.L. Strauss. According to him, structuralism is not a theory. Structuralism, it is not a theory, it is not a philosophy, or it is also not a ideology. So it is simply, then what is it, right? So it is simply a method to analyze human society. So basically it is simply a method by which we analyze the human society. It does not reject the earlier school. So it does not reject earlier school. It basically complements and supplements those schools as well. He says that all of them, such as classical evolutionist, diffusionist, historical particularism, functionalist, structural functionalist, they all have their purpose in making and through a holistic science, a holistic discipline. Okay, so but at the same time he also points out certain weaknesses in them and considers social structure as an abstract mode of or abstract model. So now we'll talk about the area, the basic premise or basic area of study of structural functionalist. See, the objective of structuralism is to study the deep and orderly principle underlying system. So we have to study the basic system of anything, that is the basic structure which is underlying the above superstructure. So whatever is the foundation of that particular thing is something which structuralists have to understand. At the same time, the aim of structuralism is qualitatively different from others as see, the aim is basically different this aim is different from others. Their aim is basically different from others. For example, the functionalist will talk about a functional aspect, that what is the relevance of that particular thing and why it is there. But as far as the if in general, if we're talking, functionalist will talk about myth and the relevance of myth. Okay, at the same time it will be studying the contribution of the functioning of myth in the functioning of society. but our interest is in that why these myths are there, or what myth is and how they are structured and what does that mean. So basic premise is what is myth. Second is how it is structured, and third is what does it mean. So this is the basic premise of structuralism, that the crux of this discussion is that everything has a structure, an underlying structure, and that is the structure that we have to find out in order to have a holistic perspective. So for structuralism, myth is a product of mind. Myth or any cultural item is a product of mind. Product of mind. Culture is also a product of mind. Culture is a product of mind, and myth is part of culture and hence becomes a part of mind. So in order to understand what mind is, we have to understand culture, and we can understand culture to various elements such as myth, such as language, right? Then there are totems. Any object of culture that comes in your mind will be applicable here. So in order to study the mind or the mind, it is important to understand the product of mind. The product of mind such as myth is basically a product of culture, and hence in order to have a complete knowledge about culture, we have to have a knowledge of myth so that we understand the basic structure for the mind. Now we also have to understand that structuralism, they supported psychic unity. Psychic unity. It means that people under similar circumstances may think similar. Now what C.L. Strauss did, he took a methodology where he used language to study the basic concept of structuralism. See, language is something which is made up of words and grammar. Words are basically, this grammar and words, these are basically important because the unit of language is a word. Unit of language is word. We call it as phoneme. So this phoneme is important, and with the help of understanding each and every phoneme, we can understand the word, and these phonemes or these words are basically together. Individual word may have a meaning, but for deriving a certain meaning, there is need for everyone to be in sync. That is what comes under the methodology. He used the methodology and particularly language because language is a product of mind. Language is a product of mind. And for a product of mind such as language, it is important to study one of the product of mind, which is language. Now he implies this idea to the society, and he says that the basic unit of the society is kinship, and he associated the terminologies of kinship with a product of mind, that is language. And then he says that 4 operations. So first is that he study the language and shift the attention from conscious to subconscious. So attention is from conscious to subconscious. So now the attention have been shifted. Second is linguist does not consider linguistic term in isolated entities. They are basically in relation to each other. Relation with each other. the words basically. Third is the social linguistic, also concerned with the discovery of general law. General law. So this is what a social linguist have to be concerned with. And language basically is nothing but a system. Language as a system. Now C.L. Strauss, he'll do the 4 basic operation in study of society. First is like phoneme, that is the word. Kinship is an element of society, and there is a meaning with each and every kinship terminology. Then one kin term is related for another is not is related to other, right? One kin is related to other kin. Our relations are dependent upon these terminologies. For example, consider this to be ego. Okay, consider it to be an ego. This is mother, and this is father, and this is ego. So for ego, he is, in Hindi it is Dadaji, and mother's father is Nanaji. So this terminologies will be linked to other because he is the father, that Dadaji is the father of his father or her father, or Nanaji is the father of his or her mother. So basically one kinship, the term depends on another. The third is kinship system is built in mind. Kinship is a system which is built in mind, and hence a product of mind, and it is subconscious. And all of this, it leads to a conclusion that observable phenomena are the result of laws which are general. So this is basically make sure that these are nothing but the laws which are general in nature. That's the last point. Now if we evaluate this structuralism, the British anthropologist such as Edmund Leach or Douglas, they were highly influenced or impressed by the method of Levi-Strauss, and they preferred structural method, but they are different from Levi-Strauss in terms of its generalization, because British anthropologists believe that they won't be able to reach to a universal law, because Levi-Strauss believed in the aim of structuralism is to find the universal proposition of humankind, and as per as the universal proposition of human mind is concerned, this is vast, this is large, this is just out of imagination. That is what is believed by British anthropologists. And Douglas, he used the concept of structuralism for local studies as well, local level as well. Further, Strauss was criticized since he did not talk about social change. Did not, it will be in criticism, so arrange your points accordingly. Did not talk about change. Basically we're talking about social change. He did not talk about social change. So the structuralism started losing its hold on anthropology, and they're concerned with knowledge of particular society, and they're concerned with knowing about particular society. They are concerned with knowing of the particular society. This does not mean structuralism is totally reluctant. इसका मतलब ये तो नहीं है कि structuralism पूरी तरह से खत्म हो चुका है और इसका relevance नहीं है. This is not like that. It is useful in the study of mind and in limited generalization. It is important for conclusion. Okay, it is important for study of mind and limited generalization. Limited generalization, it is not totally outdated or not of use or not totally redundant. Redundant and since literature, see, this is also have influenced, this structuralism also have influenced literature, because literature is also product of mind. Thus, in spite of this all criticism, structuralism contributes to the growth of anthropology, and by showing the structural aspect of society which is still useful for various socio-economic purposes. Thank you. And basically this was the end. This was end for Malinowski psychological functionalism, Brown's structural functionalism, and structuralism. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.